So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. The Guardian leads with news that Andrew will now lose his prince title as well as being evicted from Royal Lodge in Windsor. The Eye says the former Duke of York will now live at Sandringham, funded by the King. With his title stripped, The Sun says Andrew will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The Star dubs Andrew the Royal, formerly known as Prince. The Daily Mail references the news about Prince Andrew, but their main story focuses on the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, and the row over renting her house, calling it a humiliation. The Metro says the Chancellor faced calls to be prosecuted for letting out her family home without a licence. And the Financial Times reports on an apparent thaw in trade relations between the US and China, with Donald Trump describing his summit with Xi Jinping as a 12 out of 10. We're joined tonight by Liam Thorp and Cindy Yu. Welcome to both of you. We're going to start with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as he will now be called. Front page of The Guardian, stripped of his royal titles, and he must move out of Royal Lodge. Liam.
Yeah, and quite right too. I think the main criticism here is why it's taken so long for this to happen. But it appears that the reputational damage that the royal family is continuing to face because of Prince Andrew, formerly known as Prince Andrew, I'm going to have to get used to saying that, it has got too much for the King, for, we suspect, Prince William as well, and they've moved. And this is kind of the final humiliation that many will say he deserves. You know, he deserves to be a pariah. He's going to be a pariah. He's going to live in a sort of form of exile. Although I would point out that he's still going to be living a fairly comfortable life in private lodgings in Sandringham, but it's certainly less obscene than many will have associated with him living in a 30-bedroom lodge funded, let's face it, you know, whichever way you square it, largely by the taxpayer. And it feels like a decisive moment that's possibly come after too long of waiting. If you look at the public polling, I think there was some out today that says that, you know, 90-odd% of the population now have a deeply unfavourable view of Andrew. I think there was 1% that had a very favourable view of him, which I'm very curious about, and I wonder if he'd been interviewed for that particular survey. You know, the tipping point was coming. What's interesting, we were talking about this before, is it was only a week or so ago that his other titles were taken off him, Duke of York. And a lot of people were saying at the time...
But not technically. He elected not to use them.
Yeah, that was it. And he said, which I thought was particularly nauseating, that he was acting, as he always has done, for the good of his country and the family, which it didn't go down well with people. It's shown a kind of breathtaking arrogance for his, you know, the situation he has brought upon himself and brought upon his family and brought upon the country. And then a week later, you know, this very, very decisive action from the King. You do wonder what's changed in that week. Obviously, further reputational damage. We don't know what else is set to come out in terms of revelations about the relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. But I think that the royal family have decided now is the time to act at its most decisive, and I don't think there'd be many people in the country who would disagree.
Cindy, and we read that the King has had the support of the Prince of Wales in making the decision, and that apparently Andrew didn't object.
Yes, well, I mean, he's definitely jumped, didn't he? Because he's now being pushed quite hard, and I guess he might say that he made the final small leap himself just to save some face, but clearly this is what Charles and William both wanted. And for William, it's a case of needing this to be sorted out before he becomes king. We see from various occasions when the rare occasions that they are still seen publicly together, such as a funeral earlier this year, where William is just incredibly frosty with his uncle, actually, and for good reason as well. And so I think we can expect that behind the scenes, the Prince of Wales really pressured his dad to say, you know, look, we have to get this sorted before I become king, otherwise he's just going to run and run and run. And as Liam says, the fact that this happened so quickly after Andrew elected to not use his Duke of York title, it kind of raises questions about what they were thinking might come out further. And we know in the States that actually the Epstein question has become a political question between the Democrats and the Republicans. So it is possible that actually more things do come out than we know at the moment.
We turn to the Eye, and they're describing it as a historic move to save the monarchy. Do you think that that's been upmost in the King's mind? Yeah,
I think it's a crisis for the monarchy, and people have been, you know, more and more people have been losing faith in the system, in the establishment of the monarchy. and it has caused continued reputational damage to them. And what is quite interesting, and you know, some people will disagree with me on this, but when you think about the Queen's role in this, obviously it's kind of widely known that Andrew was her favourite son. There's quite a few people saying today that there was more protection offered to him when she was alive, which may have prolonged this process. Someone described it as like a very slow removing of a plaster, and I think that's quite a good way of describing it, because it's been years. You know, if you think back to the Newsnight interview with Emily Maitlis, which we'll all remember, you know, which for me at that point, you know, the damage was kind of done then. It was such an appalling performance, and it was so obvious that, you know, he showed no contrition. I think that was one of the biggest things. That,
well, he actually believed that he'd performed quite well in that interview.
It just shows the complete and utter kind of
disconnect.
Yeah, the total disconnect. Everyone who watched that car crash interview was like, this is staggeringly bad. He walked out of it thinking he'd given a good account of himself, and even when offered the chance to be, you know, to show contrition, to apologise, he really kind of ducked that opportunity. And in all of his statements since, he has had this kind of pompous, you know, I'm doing this because it's my honour and I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart. And I think that the King and others, because I thought it was really interesting, actually, that in the statement today, interesting and important, that there was a significant mention of the victims involved here, which Andrew has never done, because obviously he doesn't want to admit anything, and he kind of wants to put that to one side. And there's more revelations that have come out around how he's acted in terms of the stuff coming towards him and potentially asking for police to get involved and things like that. And it seems like the King and Camilla and the rest of them have put a fine line on this and said, actually, we're going to show where our priorities are, and that's with the victims, not with this disgraced member of the family.
And Cindy, Andrew has never apologised, and he's always denied wrongdoing, hasn't
Yes,
he?
and that is important that we say that he denies wrongdoing. He protests his innocence. He has never gone to court or trial for this because they settled out of court with the claims, you know. So we will never know the true nature of this, and it's important to say that Andrew does deny them. I think, you know, as Liam says, there was just so many more revelations coming out with Virginia Giuffre's posthumous memoir as well. The allegations in there, including that Andrew was not only not contrite, but was actually searching for evidence that she was somehow blackmailing him, that she was somehow being cynical about all of this. So he clearly doesn't think that he's in the wrong at all. Or he thinks that if he is doing the wrong, he shouldn't be punished for it at all. And now, I guess, ever since the Queen has passed, his brother and his nephew has decided actually it's not good enough anymore, and no one will be here covering for him anymore.
And Virginia Giuffre's family releasing a statement today. We know that they had previously called for his royal title to be removed, and in that statement today, they say, today an ordinary American girl from an ordinary American family brought down a British prince with her truth and extraordinary courage. Just,
you know, in all of this, you need to remember the victims, and that there's a woman there who took her own life earlier this year, and under the most intense and horrendous pressure that she's lived with for such a long time, and that's who most people should be thinking of today, and her family. And I thought that was a really courageous statement that they came out with today.
The Star, in true to form, injecting humour into the story. The royal, formerly known as Prince, a skit of the artist formerly known as Prince. But the other thing to mention is that he is, well, essentially being evicted from Royal Lodge.
Yes, exactly. He'll be going to Sandringham now. We don't know which of the houses on the estate it will be, but as we understand it, they're all slightly more modest than Royal Lodge, which has 30 rooms and 8 bedrooms, and he had been living in with his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson. Sarah Ferguson is no longer going to be living with him. She is not invited to Sandringham, so in this new arrangement that the King is paying for, it will only be Andrew in much more modest circumstances, and we're told that he will have provisions made for him in terms of financial provisions from the King. I think that's a good thing, because we have seen from Andrew as well, other than the Epstein links and the Virginia Giuffre allegations, it's also his links with quite dodgy characters across the business world, across the world. You know, we had the allegations of the Chinese spy at the end of last year, certain Middle Eastern business people, certain people who've later found to have done fraud. So he is clearly someone who is capable of monetizing his title, as it were. And so I actually think, you know, it's quite good to keep on a tight leash and exile, but in internal exile, where, you know, he's not completely cut off, because actually who he is still has a lot of cachet across the world, and that is an important thing to keep a close eye on.
Could just go and get a job at Asda, like other people would have to, but apparently that's not going to happen.
To be fair, he is close retirement age anyway, but...
Liam, does it make a difference that he's moving out of Royal Lodge? I mean, he's still going to be in very comfortable surroundings, isn't he, at Sandringham?
I think optics are important, and yes, whilst certainly I would believe that he's still going to be living a far too comfortable life, at least the optics of living in this massive, sprawling 30-bed mansion at the, effectively the cost of the taxpayer. Some people will make a claim about the sort of specifics of the Crown estate, but it effectively is. It's paid to the government and then back to them. It's the public purse, and it's huge, kind of secluded. If you remember, one of the big issues in terms of when the legal case that Virginia Giuffre was trying to bring was that they couldn't actually get the legal papers to hand them to Andrew because they couldn't get onto the estate because he was living in this completely secure area. So I think when we talk about how things have started to ramp up, this stuff around the peppercorn rent that he was having to pay, and not to get too much on my soapbox here, but there is a massive housing crisis in this country. There's lots of people without homes, living in unstable accommodation. You've got this disgraced member of the royal family paying a peppercorn rent for an enormous mansion. It looks absolutely terrible.
Okay.
So at least they can sort of put that to one side and get rid of those optics.
Liam and Cindy, thank you very much both for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, has the Chancellor changed her story over the controversy surrounding her private property dealings? We'll discuss that next.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest and 'Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island.
The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out. The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
Gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
What country are you
from? The UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
I'm Stephen Murphy and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview, still with me, Liam and Cindy. Let's have a look at the front page of the Mail. And the story, well, has been relegated. This is humiliation for Reeves, they're saying, and this is over her letting her family home and not having a licence to do so. Is it humiliation or is this overwritten, do you think, Cindy?
Well, the story has changed quite a lot. So it only really came out over the last day or so that actually her family home had been rented out without this licence that the local council required, and that actually she might have been subject to £32,000 worth of rent to be paid back to her tenants. Now, obviously, quite a large amount of money coming after Angela Rayner's housing infringements. Quite a bad look for the government. But what's happened in the last couple of hours is actually the lettings agency has come out and said, we were meant to do this licence for her. We said that we would, and we haven't. So it's nothing to do with her. And there seem to be emails that correspond to that account. So it may be a case where the papers have gone to press with a really fast-changing story. And actually, if that is the case, that is down to the lettings agency not doing this, you know, you could chalk this down to an honest mistake, and it's not quite the same as what the allegations against Angela Rayner were. And so we might find, actually, in about half a day, the story is not so much a story at all.
Well, with the estate agents coming out and saying it's their fault and they promised to get the licence for her, she's exonerated.
I was just imagining there's the panic in that small neighbourhood letting agents over the last couple of days. Probably never experienced anything like this. The calls coming in from journalists. Yeah, I think that, you know, the Daily Mail will obviously always take this stance. They call it an extraordinary day of contradictory statements. It very much feels like they and the Conservative Party are trying to cling on to this supposed scandal. And I think most right-minded people would think that after the statement that came out from the letting agency saying, we literally told her we would take care of this, all right, fair enough. You might say, as she's such an important person, she could have gone back and double-checked. But I think most right-minded people would think they were given assurances that they would take care of it, they would do that, and they just proceeded thinking that that was the case. To be honest, I never really thought this was a resigning issue for the Chancellor. I mean, I never thought she would go anyway because she's too important to the Starmer project.
Well, it's too close to the budget.
And too close to the budget. That's a different factor. But the actual specifics of it, even before the letting agent came out, I thought most people would be able to say that it was an honest mistake. Now, I think it's very clear that actually it was taken out of her hands. She was given assurances. What the Daily Mail are trying to cling on to here is that there's a slight change in her own story. And there is some truth in that, because she said initially that she wasn't aware that she needed a licence. What I think the current state of play is that she did get told she needed one. She just got told that someone else was taking care of it. But, you know, that's something that you could easily have slipped your mind if you know, I think that's maybe a little bit of a niche kind of thing that they're hanging on to. And I think for the Conservatives now, they're starting to look a bit weak on this, because if you keep, as the story keeps changing, if you keep holding the line and saying, well, we still think she should resign, even, you know, prominent members of the Conservative Party, we saw today, Miriam Cates, people like Nadeem Zahawi said, actually, I think this isn't really a story. And so I think that Kemi Badenoch needs to kind of let it go now.
We've also got the Metro employing the Halloween theme. Nightmare on Downing Street. Reeves House Gaff haunts Starmer. But as we say, as with the Mail, the story really has gone away.
I think Cindy's right. I think for some of these newspapers, they really liked the idea of a Halloween-themed story and a nightmare thing, and they went with it already.
Lean into the monster house. Yeah.
We've just got time, probably about just under a minute, to talk about President Trump, his meeting with Xi Jinping. He scored it a 12 out of 10, a huge success, according to him. Cindy?
Yes, he's clearly very pleased, having left South Korea. The two countries were at the verge of another phase of a full-blown trade war, but they seem to have pulled back from the brink, and both sides have agreed to basically 1 year pause in hostilities, in certain restrictions. Doesn't mean that the trade war is over. Doesn't mean that China is no longer a competitor to the US, or that the West will be any more friendly to it. But I think it does mean that this phase, at least, we are avoiding, high tariffs before Christmas.
Yeah, it is a pause from China on rare earth minerals exports, so it's not completely over, is it, Liam?
No, but what I did like was that, Donald Trump, normally a bit of a wallflower, doesn't like to kind of overstate things, said that the meeting was a 12 out of 10. So, you know, it's interesting. And in the background, there's this kind of ramping up of things like nuclear testing and things like that. But on the face of
Liam,
it, they're looking quite friendly.
We must leave it there, Liam and Cindy. Thank you so much for the moment.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
It's 11 o'clock. This is Sky News' extended press preview. Our top story. Prince Andrew is to leave his Windsor home as the King begins the process to remove all of his titles. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as he'll now be known, has been served with notice to leave Royal Lodge and will move to a property on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk. More casualties expected, a warning from Jamaican officials in the wake of Hurricane Melissa as a massive aid operation begins.
The roads are almost completely taken out here by rivers, by trees, by other debris.
Rachel Reeves' rental row. The Chancellor's estate agent apologises for an oversight in failing to apply for a licence on her behalf. And President Trump hailed an amazing meeting with his Chinese counterpart as a 12 out of 10, with a promise of a cut in tariffs. Over the next hour, we'll be discussing today's news with our reviewers, Liam Thorp and Cindy Yu. And later, we'll have a full run-through of tomorrow's front pages. Good evening. He once was a global ambassador for Britain and a decorated war hero. But tonight, it seems Andrew's fail from grace is complete. Buckingham Palace has announced the King has decided to strip his brother of his Prince title and he will have to move out of Royal Lodge. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as he'll now be known, will move to a property on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk, which will be privately funded by the King. He'd been facing increasing scrutiny over sexual abuse allegations and his relationship with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Tonight, the family of Andrew's main accuser, Virginia Giuffre, said she had brought down a British prince with her truth and extraordinary courage. Over the next hour, we'll bring you tonight's headlines, tomorrow's front pages, and the views of our paper reviewers, the Liverpool Echo's political editor, Liam Thorp, and the contributing editor for The Times and The Sunday Times, Cindy Yu. But first, our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, reports.
His fall from grace is finally complete, stripped of everything, from his titles to his home. This is a remarkable and radical moment for the royal family. As of now, the brother of the King, no longer a prince. In a statement, Buckingham Palace announced His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles and honours of Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. His lease on Royal Lodge has to date provided him with legal protection to continue in residence. Formal notice has now been served to surrender the lease and he will move to alternative private accommodation. These censures are deemed necessary, notwithstanding the fact that he continues to deny the allegations against him. Their Majesties wish to make clear that their thoughts and utmost sympathies have been and will remain with the victims and survivors of any and all forms of abuse. Andrew denied the allegations, but the repeated accusations wouldn't go away, and his associations risked real reputational damage to the royal family. His friendship with convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, his dealings with an alleged Chinese spy, and then the posthumous publication of his accuser, Virginia Giuffre's memoir. Her family said she brought down a British prince with her truth and extraordinary courage. The piling pressure from all of this was starting to overshadow the work of Andrew's wider family. And with the Prince of Wales soon heading to Brazil for his Earthshot Award, enough was enough. We understand the royal family, including Prince William, backed the King's leadership. The King made the decisions, his family supports them.
I'm sure that however much a brother wants to look after a brother as a brother, it is quite clear that in the business of kingship, more needed to be done. And the King has now acted, and this is literally an expunging.
Andrew will leave Royal Lodge, his large home on the Windsor estate. His ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, who also lived here, will make her own arrangements. It was their family home for many years. Both daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, who grew up here, will keep their titles. As for Andrew, he'll soon move to Sandringham, the King's private Norfolk estate, where the family traditionally gather for Christmas. He'll be funded privately by the King. This is all a formal process carried out in consultation with official authorities, but the government supports the decision. This will not have been easy for the King, but he simply could not ignore public opinion. The criticism and anger directed at Andrew was never going to stop, and only he, the King, had the power to take the ultimate action against his own brother. For years, Andrew enjoyed the perks and privileges of his powerful position. But his birthright could not withstand withering public disdain. And now he's finally paid the price. Laura Bundock, Sky News, at Buckingham Palace.
Let's see how tomorrow's newspapers are reacting to that story. The Guardian leads with news that Andrew will now lose his prince title as well as being evicted from Royal Lodge in Windsor. The Eye says the former Duke of York will now live at Sandringham, funded by the King. The Telegraph has the headline, Andrew no longer prince, and says his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, who'd continued to live with him at Royal Lodge for 2 decades, will be cast out and forced to find her own home. Banished is the Daily Mail's headline, which says Andrew is losing his HRH title and home as punishment for the Epstein scandal. The Star dubs Andrew the Royal, formerly known as Prince. Well, let's get the thoughts now of our guests, Liam Thorp and Cindy Yu. Welcome back to both of you. Starting with probably the front page of The Guardian, and they're detailing the fact that he'll be stripped also of his home and he has to move out. Cindy?
Yes, quite. So after, 2 weeks ago, Andrew said that he would no longer be referred to as Duke of York, but that he will still be a prince. It seems that actually the King has gone further now, stripping him of his prince title, of all his formal titles and his home as well, which technically he has this lease for 75 years, so he should be able to stay in there. But actually, following Andrew agreeing to be evicted, as it were, he is now moving out, and we hear that he is moving to Sandringham Estate, and a much more modest place than this 30-room beautiful house there, which he has been paying below market rate for since he moved in the 2000s.
Yeah, reportedly a peppercorn rent that he's been paying for quite some time. What are your thoughts, Liam, on whether he's volunteered to give the Royal Lodge up, or do you think he has been told in no uncertain terms by the King?
Well, some of the other reporting that we're getting tonight would suggest that he hasn't gone completely willingly. I think that in a lot of what we hear from Andrew on the surface of things is that he's acted honourably, and in his previous statement it was about how he's always acted on behalf of what's right for family and country. I think most of his family and most of the country would completely disagree with that. And from some other reporting, particularly in the Telegraph here, it suggests that there have been some kind of wrangling and negotiations going on for several weeks, actually. And that it says here that Buckingham Palace has been effectively trying to smoke him out, which I really like as a phrase, for the best part of a year.
It's just like a hunt.
Because it says Andrew made clear that he was going nowhere based on the 75-year cast iron lease that he signed in 2002, which did not expire until 2078. So that kind of makes a mockery of any idea that he's just kind of willingly gone along with it and that he's kind of just put his hand up and said, OK. And I think that smacks of what we've seen from him throughout most of this process, which is a kind of breathtaking arrogance and an inability to take any accountability for his actions and to kind of just continue on without contrition. And I think most people in the country, I don't know to mention a rival broadcaster, but there was a round of applause when the news came out on Question Time tonight, I believe. It's, the public feeling on this is very, very strong, and I think that the King has had to act accordingly.
And the line that you suggest that he's been pushed rather than jumping, previously in the papers, I think last week, they're reporting that he was demanding not one but 2 homes, one for himself and one for Sarah Ferguson, if he had to move out of Royal Lodge.
I mean, he's a very good ex-husband to have, I guess. Yes, she has been obviously living with him in Royal Lodge since they got divorced. It was 20 years, but now she no longer... Well, Andrew didn't get that part of his demands, as she is to find her own home.
I guess there's 30 bedrooms, isn't there? So they could live quite far apart from each other.
Yes, exactly. And I guess if it was going to be fewer bedrooms, maybe they
have to be a bit closer quarters,
and the other interesting thing from the Telegraph reporting is that what we previously thought about stripping dukedoms comes from an Act of Parliament. But actually, Charles is saying that he doesn't want to go through Parliament, taking up valuable MP's time, and he's actually just going to send a royal warrant to the Lord Chancellor, who is David Lammy, and remove him from the role of peerage. So doing that in a bit of a roundabout way that actually is less kind of, political, I guess, in parliamentary in the time that it takes.
And Liam, that's unprecedented, isn't it? Because we had previously thought that it would have to go through Parliament, there'd have to be an Act of Parliament to remove his titles officially.
I think that everyone involved, and I would include the Prime Minister in this, we know he has a weekly meeting with the King, and it's undoubtedly this will have come up. Everyone will want as little kind of parliamentary time used on this, I think, and just to kind of get this done and get this moved on, because it's, you know, he is like a bad headline machine, Prince Andrew, isn't he? Oh, sorry, Andrew. You know, if you're just only looking at, you know, the last few weeks, we've had obviously further revelations about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, the China spy scandal, the accusations that he was trying to get the police to dig up dirt on Virginia Giuffre. You know, I think that the king and the family just want these stories to go away. And if you were to have a protracted, you know, parliamentary process, it would continue to be at the forefront of the news. There are political elements to it, though, because, you know, and it's very rare that we see the kind of royal story get into Parliament, and that shows how unprecedented it is. We've had, you know, there was potentially royal members going to appear at a committee, you know, a parliamentary committee. It's been mentioned by the Lib Dems in Parliament. There's investigations being called for about his place at Royal Lodge. So I think that there probably is an agreement with the government and the royal family that in terms of this process now, just get it done, get it quickly moved on, get him into effective exile and try and move on from there.
The other good thing about not going through Parliament, it seems, is that the princesses, Eugenie and Beatrice, retain their title. So they will remain working royals, because actually, if you go through...
lost their titles?
Yes, if you go through an Act of Parliament, they would have also had to lose. So that's why Andrew not using his title voluntarily was also good for them. And I think there is a point here to be made about a slimmed-down monarchy and how with Harry and Meghan's exit, that actually they need all the working royals they can get.
OK. Cindy and Liam, thank you very much for the moment. Let's move on to another big news story, and that is Hurricane Melissa. Officials in Jamaica say they expect the number of dead is likely to rise as a result of the hurricane. As a massive aid operation begins, the Foreign Office said it will airlift stranded British nationals out of the disaster zone. The hurricane wreaked havoc across the Caribbean. The eye of the storm made landfall on the southwest coast of the island, 75 miles from the capital, Kingston. Our correspondent Martha Kellner reports from St Elizabeth in Jamaica.
This is the place they're calling Ground Zero for Hurricane Melissa. The town of Black River, which, as the name suggests, is known for its dark water. Murky water, which is now washed all over what remains. The wind took care of the rest. It's now almost cut off from the rest of the island, as my team and I discover. This is the challenge that people have when they're trying to get back to their homes. The roads are almost completely taken out here by rivers, by trees, by other debris. And that's why the emergency services as well are finding it so difficult to get to the worst affected areas. We drive underneath a snarl of fallen power lines, past several towns where children play outside houses which no longer have roofs. The historic St Thomas Anglican Church in Lacovia, with its beautiful stained glass windows now hollowed out. Outside a primary school now being used as a shelter, volunteer Cherie is pleading for help for the people inside.
I've never seen this in my entire life. And it is heartbreaking. I never thought in a million years that I would be in this situation trying to get help. And with little to no communication, we can't reach no officials, no emergency teams. The best help we have received after the hurricane is from security personnel from the Lacovia police station who tried to get us medical assistance, but to date nobody has come because they too are flooded. They have lost their homes. And we're just not sure what to expect from this. But it feels like a total reset for us right now. A total reset. And I'm hoping and praying that help can reach us soon.
Sounds like you're doing your very, very best for these people. You have elderly people inside the shelter, some of them unwell.
Very unwell now, and that's why we need any form of medical assistance now. I know for one of my shelteries she's the oldest. Since the incident, she has been totally out of it.
This was the first flight carrying passengers into Jamaica after the hurricane, departing Miami and carrying dozens of rescue and relief workers. Dr. Alison Thompson has operated in disaster zones for decades.
I've been helping coordinate about 20 teams on WhatsApp, and they're all landing in the next few days. But if we're late, people die. So we try to get in as quick as we can. But it's hard when the whole country's shut down.
Others on board were going in search of family they haven't heard from since the storm, and a warning now that the number of deaths here could sadly rise.
I know there are so many people in Jamaica all over the world that I know your heart is breaking because you've not heard from your families. And so please know that the government is doing everything we can to get to them.
But for some here, that help is not arriving fast enough. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Lacovia, Jamaica.
Let's take a look at how that story is being covered in the newspapers. The clean-up efforts feature on the insides of the metro. Their headline, Heavy Toll of Hurricane Melissa. The Eye also focuses on that story, looking at where the hurricane is due to hit next. Let's get the thoughts of Liam and Cindy once again. Only featuring in a couple of the newspapers, inside the newspapers, nothing on the front pages, and fairly surprising considering the Jamaican Prime Minister describes the scene as total destruction. Liam.
And particularly, when you think about the incredibly strong links between the UK and Jamaica, we know that there will have been many people from the UK visiting family over there, so much so that the government has had to charter specific flights to help British nationals leave Jamaica in the wake of this absolute devastation. And just seeing from your report there, it's we're still waiting to find out about the death toll, and that will surely, sadly, rise. And it's not just about that, it's about those who are left behind picking up the pieces as well. The US forecaster Accuser estimated that the cost to the in terms of damages, the economic loss that rebuilding could cost is $22 billion. There's lots of poor communities in the places that have been hit. It's going to take a massive gargantuan effort to try and get these places back on their feet. But in the first instance, we obviously just have to think about the people who've lost their lives and been so traumatised in this. And of course, it's still going on. That's the really sad thing, is that as some communities are coming to terms with what's happened, the storm is continuing. And we know that from Jamaica, Cuba and Haiti have already been hit, but across the Bahamas and places like Bermuda are preparing for the storm to reach them. All we can hope for is that it's starting to lose a bit of its power and it's not quite reaching the wind speeds that it was when it was the strongest ever hurricane to hit Jamaica.
Cindy, are you surprised this still isn't on the front page?
Well, yes, considering how many Andrews we've talked about. I understand that Andrew is a British story. I think part of the reason that this is not picking up more attention is I think there is a tendency to see natural disasters as something that actually doesn't necessarily make for good news when it's not here, because it's a natural disaster, unless there can be something said about it being linked to, for example, climate change or international politics. I think it is hard for newspapers to front with it, but that doesn't mean it's not important. As Liam says, there are such human devastation happening here. I think it just goes to show that actually sometimes this kind of story, it's just devastating, but actually that people want to hear about the royals a little bit more, at least in this country, I mean. But I think
the point that Liam was making, that it also affects very many people in this country.
Well, I was just about to say,
there are so many relatives that are...
Well, exactly, and the government has obviously trying to evacuate British citizens from Jamaica, but we also haven't heard anything really from the King, and actually the King is the King of Jamaica as well, and so, this is the kind of thing that the UK probably should pay more attention to, but for various reasons that we just don't.
I'm not sure if we haven't heard from the King, actually. I thought there was a statement...
I'm not sure.
Yeah, there was a statement. I'm being told yesterday.
As we can see from the front, he's been quite busy with other dealings as well. But this should be, as you say, top of his agenda as well, because it's part of the Commonwealth. It's the links are so strong between the countries, and there are so many British nationals affected. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it should be more present. I think the news has a tendency to move on quite quickly, but these people can't move on quickly.
No, and the hurricane is moving on, so the story continues heading to Bermuda, as you say. Thank you both for the moment. You are watching the press preview, still to come. Nightmare on Downing Street following the Reeves rental row. Or is it? Stay with us to find out.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
What country are you
From the UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. Just want to bring you some breaking news, and that is that Sir Keir Starmer has told Rachel Reeves she faces no further action over her inadvertent failure to obtain a rental licence, even though it was regrettable. Emails about the arrangement had not been shared with him initially. This follows comments from the Prime Minister's independent standards advisor, who said he still believes that Rachel Reeves made an unfortunate but inadvertent error in her failure to obtain a rental licence, and that it was clear the Chancellor's husband did not recall being informed about the requirement for a licence. Well, let's see how the papers tomorrow are covering that story. The Metro says Keir Starmer faces another nightmare amid the Chancellor facing calls to be prosecuted for renting out her family home without a licence. Humiliation for Reeves. The Daily Mail highlights the Chancellor's admission that she and her husband were unaware they required a selective rental licence. The Eye says the Prime Minister retains full confidence in Reeves, with the Number 10 spokesperson confirming she will deliver the November budget. The Times reports the Conservatives have called on Starmer to launch a proper investigation into the case, which Kemi Badenoch said stinks. The Guardian reports the lettings agency used by Reeves has accepted responsibility for failing to apply for the licence and apologised. The Daily Telegraph says the Chancellor is facing cover-up claims and could have to pay back more than £38,000. We're back to Liam and Cindy now for their thoughts on those stories. Many of them absolutely outdated at this point, really, Liam. But was she ever under any threat, do you think?
I don't think so, for a variety of reasons. One, politically, I think that it would take an awful lot for Keir Starmer to sack Rachel Reeves, particularly before, you know, the most important budget she's probably ever going to deliver, and because their kind of dual roles in this government are so massively aligned, more than any other cabinet member, of course. But also, I just don't think that it was ever going to be enough of a scandal, however much the Conservatives and the Daily Mail may have wanted it to be, to actually oust her, particularly after, obviously, the developments today in which the letting agency basically kind of took full blame for it. They admitted that they gave assurances that the licence would be applied for, that they would do it. And I think that most right-thinking people, even if you don't particularly like Rachel Reeves, would say that's kind of fair enough. If a letting agency says, we're going to do that for you, you trust that they're going to do it, it's their domain, they should do. People might, if they've been really harsh, might say that she should have gone back and checked, but I think that is probably being a little bit harsh. And I think that some of these newspapers have been either, whether it's politically keen to have a go at it, or in some cases just keen to make some sort of Halloween-themed front pages work for the time of year. I think they're looking at maybe a little bit daft now, particularly with some of the other big news that's come out sort of throughout the day. So I think that news that you've just brought to us there, that Keir Starmer's kind of just, and the Standards Commissioner has just basically said it's over, I think that's probably the end of that story now.
I mean, it's important to say that Southwark Council itself, according to The Guardian, is saying that they're not going to take any action.
Yeah.
So the council's not taking any action. The emails show that the lettings agency have apologised, and now the Prime Minister is saying that he's not going to take any action. I think it does sound like, because Rachel Reeves came out with it and all of this has come out so quickly, she has, you know, this hasn't become a drawn-out affair. Unlike Angela Rayner, arguably, you know, because she denied it and there was so much obfuscation at the beginning of that process, I think it actually made it much bigger.
You get a feel for these things, and, you know, working in journalism with the Angela Rayner thing, I think we could all start to feel that this was going in one direction. I don't think I've ever really felt that with this story, and in fact, it's only gone in the other direction, really. And I think the Conservatives and Kemi Badenoch have to row back a little bit, because they've been desperately trying to cling onto it and say that it stinks. I mean, it doesn't stink. It's an inadvertent error. It clearly doesn't stink, and that's what has been found today.
Yeah.
The Prime Minister's independent standards advise, though, in that statement, seemingly blaming Rachel Reeves' husband.
Yeah, I know. Awkward around the dinner table, isn't it? I know, as the people that have been dragged into this, Rachel Reeves' husband, this, you know, small-time letting agency, have all been kind of thrust into the national spotlight. But it does, again, just kind of push the blame away from her.
I think it's an interesting feature of our politics, though. I feel like this kind of thing wouldn't happen in the US. You know, you're an elected politician, you're in government for, let's say, a 4 or 5 year term. Unless you're re-elected, you have to move back to your family home. What do you do with your family home in the meantime? In America, this kind of stuff, one imagines, you know, there are people who sort this out for you because you know this is what elected politicians have to do. In this country, it's almost quite quaint that our politicians are expected to go to their own lettings agencies, you know, sort out their own licences, even if she is the Chancellor.
Yeah.
I personally, as a voter, want my Chancellor to be doing more important things.
Do you think she ran a quick hoover around the flat?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I just think, you know, there are ways in which our, you know, British politics could maybe make things slightly easier for ministers, because we know that the system is designed for them to temporarily vacate their family homes.
It's a good point. I put something out on social media today, and quite a lot of people said, you know, I want the Chancellor to be focused entirely on the economy and the economic performance. I don't really want her having to deal with things like this. And I guess she didn't think that she had to, because she'd been given these assurances.
Well, she thought her husband was doing it.
I know, yeah. Let's put the blame on him. But I just think she's
But also, it's further complicated by the fact that not every council requires this licence to be bought.
In Liverpool, where I cover, it's been one of the sort of first councils to bring in the landlord licensing. And by the way, I think it's a really important thing, and it's a tool that councils can use to kind of drive up standards of, you know, the private rented sector, which can be really, really shocking. So, but it's it's not only that not all councils do it, but there's selective areas of each council that do it. One slightly awkward thing was that Rachel Reeves put out a tweet saying that she really welcomed it coming in her constituency, which slightly muddied things and didn't look great. But it's on the whole, it's a good principle, but it is complicated. Not every council does it, and not every area.
A further thing that might give the story continued legs. Apparently, the tenants can ask for the money back that they paid in rent.
Yeah. So a lot of this stuff is about, even with the Angela Rayner case, it's about the complications in our rental market, the complications in our housing market, and politicians falling foul of this. Not necessarily because it's their fault, but actually what the lesson we take from it is actually the system is too complicated. So even if politicians fall into it, how are ordinary people meant to know better? And so that's, I think, the other maybe more long-lasting reflection from all of this is actually, should we be asking for more licensing? Should we be asking, there's this Renters' Rights Bill going through Parliament at the moment, which has been controversial in some parts of the housing market. So I think that's the more, important topic to have.
And if you do ask for this licence, you should inform the property owners, because that was the thing she didn't know.
Just to point on the kind of reaction, I think, the Daily Mail front page, humiliation for Reeves, seeing some of the comments from the Conservatives today, I think that if you continue to just kind of constantly go for people like this, even on something that turns out to not be that big a deal, it kind of weakens your position when you then call for a resignation the next time. And it feels like the Tories have gone so hard on this, because obviously they're very against Rachel Reeves. They want to kick up as much of a fuss before the budget, which is obviously a massive deal. But I think you even had senior sort of former cabinet members like Nadeem Zahawi, people like Miriam Cates come out today saying, actually, it isn't a very big deal. So I think that you do lose a bit of the impact of when you next call for someone to resign, because you just do it every time that there's a mild scandal.
Yeah, especially with Kemi Badenoch saying it stinks.
Yeah.
Yes, point taken. Cindy and Liam, thank you very much for the moment. You are watching the press preview. Coming up, we'll have a full run-through of tomorrow's front pages and discuss much more of the day's news. Do stay with us if you can.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview with some of the stories making tomorrow's newspapers. We're joined once again by the Liverpool Echo's political editor, Liam Thorp, and the contributing editor for The Times and The Sunday Times, Cindy Yoon. So let's see what's on the front pages of the newspapers for you now. Well, The Guardian leads with news that Andrew will now lose his prince title as well as being evicted from Royal Lodge in Windsor. The Eye says the former Duke of York will now live at Sandringham, funded by the King. With his title stripped, The Sun says Andrew will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The Telegraph has the headline, Andrew no longer Prince. That story also features on the front page of the Daily Express. The Times says the King banishes disgraced royal to lonely life on Sandringham estate. And the Mirror is a one-word headline, finally. While the Star dubs Andrew the Royal, formerly known as Prince. The Daily Mail references the news about Prince Andrew, but their main story focuses on the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, and the row over renting her house, calling it a humiliation. The Metro says the Chancellor faced calls to be prosecuted for letting out her family home without a licence. And the Financial Times reports on an apparent thaw in trade relations between the US and China, with Donald Trump calling his summit with Xi Jinping a 12 out of 10. Well, Lynn and Cindy are still with us. The President does know how to count. I think he was making a point of how fantastic the summit had gone. Liam, did it?
I mean, we only have to take Donald Trump's word for it. It's interesting, isn't it? There's been so much kind of brinkmanship between these two great superpowers, both sort of slapping tariffs on each other's products. But I think there's a realpolitik that has to come into this, which is, for example, I don't know loads about this particular area, but, the China and its domination of the supply chain of rare earths, which I believe are pretty essential for a lot of companies around the world. So once you sort of take that into factor, America have to kind of come and meet them in the middle at some point. We never know with Donald Trump. 1 minute he will be having cordial scenes like this with world leaders, and then he'll be popping up on Truth Social, calling them all sorts of names. The next time we've seen it with various others, but it certainly seems like a thawing of relations, which Cindy will know a lot more about than I will.
Cindy, it has to be said, though, that Xi Jinping didn't seem as enamoured of Donald Trump as he was.
He's always got that expression on, I think,
Inscrutable.
yeah, exactly. A very kind of polite inscrutability. And Trump, in that clip that we just saw, when you listen to the audio, Trump was there going on about how much he likes his old friend Xi Jinping. We've known him for a very long time, doing his thing. And you can hear the Chinese translator translating for Xi. And Xi just doesn't really say anything. So he's just polite, a bit
cool,
distanced.
wasn't he?
Yeah, very, very measured, I think, compared to the Trump approach, which is much more spontaneous, I guess you could say. Yeah, a bit more bombastic.
Does that suggest that he's wielding the power in this scenario?
Well, I think he certainly feels like, that's just his approach. I've never seen Xi speak out of turn. It's very, very rare that we see something like that in this kind of Trump-style outburst. The Chinese leadership under Xi Jinping just doesn't do that, except for one occasion when Xi was caught on camera telling off, I think it was the Canadian Prime Minister at the time, Justin Trudeau, for leaking to the press, but that was a very rare occasion. So I think it's just the Chinese way of doing things, the way that politics is reported. Those leaders, and actually this clip is so instructive because Xi walks into his car, surrounded by a gaggle of security detail. Trump then walks off to his car, and he's meters away from the press. Yeah. And there is basically no anxiety about that. So that's just, I thought earlier today when I saw that clip, it just said to you the difference between Chinese and Western politics, that the Chinese leadership are always protected. They're very high security, they're very inaccessible. Whereas in the West, it's slightly more lax, and that kind of manifests in different ways as well.
I thought this was interesting in the FT's report. Scott Kennedy from the CSIS think tank says that Xi stared down Trump and Trump blinked. Xi has mastered at managing Trump, which obviously Trump wouldn't like to hear, but you know, I think there's a fair argument to be made that he's started to get the upper hand there.
Who do you think's walked away the winner in this?
I mean, it's really hard to tell at this moment because the trade war hasn't ended yet, and actually, you know, moves that Xi has made, for example, these rare earth restrictions, obviously they are a massive chokehold, and China has the upper hand at the moment. But by showing your hand with something like that, you are spurring other countries to diversify their supply chains away from China as well. So in the long term, how many of these kind of threats and hostage diplomacy really is effective, I think we don't know yet. And actually what we find is that, same for when America does this, when either side threatens some kind of economic warfare, that just makes other people get scared and try to find alternatives, actually.
Which Trump has been guilty of, with hiking
exactly
the tariffs and then taking them off the following day. So, yeah, very, very volatile. The Times, let's turn to domestic politics. Labour abandons plan to save £5 billion from disability benefits. Liam?
Yeah, so you'll remember that very controversially, it was Liz Kendall, when she was in post as the Work and Pensions Minister, brought forward these massive sweeping cuts. They can call them reforms, but they were looking to save £5 billion from the welfare bill. And this prompted a very, very stark and strong reaction from Labour's backbenchers. And effectively, the government had to completely climb down on that to the point where they basically agreed to not do any of it, and instead brought forward this review, which was Stephen Timms, who was the welfare minister. And what we're hearing now is that the Timms review is basically going to agree to not bring forward any of those cuts. So effectively, it's a massive win for the backbenchers. And it's a difficult one for the government because they really sort of set their stall out with this. Obviously, Liz Kendall not in that position anymore. It's now Pat McFadden who's inherited it. And you know, from the reporting I did on it, there was a real anger that so much of this was focused on PIP, the disability benefit, and there was a lot of people who were going to face a lot of hardship. And you know, MPs in Merseyside, many of them were the ones who objected to this, who voted against it. You remember there was that letter that I think 130 MPs or whatever signed. But it was really difficult for the government because it showed they'd kind of lost control of their party, of their benches, and that's obviously not the first time that that's happened. We've seen, obviously, there was huge pressure over things like the winter fuel allowance. It feels like a lot of the things they've tried to do, they have had to back down on. And what the MPs that I spoke to about this would say was that there was basically zero consultation between the government and these MPs. And if there had been much earlier on, then there could have been negotiations and it could have ended up not being such an embarrassing bloody nose for the government. But there's a real issue there, a bit of a disconnect between the government and its backbenchers, and that results in what is effectively a very embarrassing climb down for the government.
Cindy, it does feed into that narrative that the government aren't in control.
Yeah, and it brings up, memories of Rachel Reeves in tears on the front bench after some of these cuts were shelved because she knew what a difficult job she then had. At last year's budget, she basically left herself with no fiscal headroom at all. The situation has significantly worsened since then, so she really needed these cuts to come through. She really needs to find tens of billions of pounds before this next budget. And with the government backing down in the face of any cuts, moral question aside, it is really unclear how Rachel Reeves is going to find that without tax rises.
To the eye, Liam, and public support for two-child benefit cap seemingly weakened now.
Yeah, this is something I've spoken about many times, and unfortunately, as Cindy says there, because of the kind of mounting benefits bill that we see there, it seems less and less likely that we are going to see the two-child benefit cut removed. It is, in my opinion, the single quickest and most effective way to take hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty overnight. I've spoken to public health experts, child doctors in Liverpool, who say that this is the one lever that they would ask the government to pull. And, I was really hoping that Labour would have put it in their manifesto, and they didn't, and obviously that was very controversial at the time. It has felt like it's starting to turn a little bit, and Keir Starmer has said previously he was open to it, but I think that the kind of fiscal situation that you talk about, the fact that they've backed down over the benefits bill means this feels a little bit further away. I think what the iPaper here is saying is that people are starting to realise that this is the way to take children out of poverty. And if you're a Labour government, if you look at the last Labour government, one of their great successes was they did take millions of children out of poverty. Gordon Brown was kind of intent on that. We haven't seen that. We've got a child poverty strategy that, in my opinion, is missing the one obvious lever that you pull. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's £3 billion, but it's a very effective way to take loads of kids out of poverty overnight and to you know, hopefully, you know, if you're looking at it fiscally, make those savings in the long term as well, because those people won't be suffering in the same way and requiring NHS treatment, which we know, you know, if you are suffering from poverty as a child at a very young age, you will require further health treatment as you get older. So it's a long-term decision to take, and I think that the longer it goes on, the more likely it seems that Labour are going to duck this one.
Cindy, just because of time, if you don't mind, can we move on to the Telegraph and the possibility of the worst winter flu outbreak for a decade, we read?
Yes, hospital admissions have been the highest they have been in nearly 10 years, and actually arrived a month earlier because obviously we're getting into flu season, so it's to be expected, but they've already started now. And I think so the Telegraph is reporting that cases have increased from 6.1% to 8.2%, largely driven by a spike among children. And I think, you know, just going back to the fiscal situation that we're talking about, because the NHS is public funded, situations like this does not make for any more pleasant reading for the government, and especially for the Chancellor. There are all these impossible decisions to be made. Do you raise taxes on working people? Do you cut disability benefits? Do you keep limiting welfare for large families? Do you fund the NHS? You know, governance is making impossible decisions, and actually, right now I think it has never been so hard as it is now, because there's just so little to play with in terms of the different levers that they could pull.
Can I just say quickly on the NHS, that, you know, the crisis in the hospitals is already here, and it's here all year round now. It's just going to get worse as the winter goes on, and we've seen people lining corridors every day now. So once again, kind of dreading what's coming in the winter.
Got about 20 seconds.
It's good because neither of us know what this is.
Yeah, well, I can't help either. Why is Dictionary.com's word of the year 2 numbers?
We're too old to know really what the story is. Viewers at home, if you're watching Sky News, you're also too old to know what the story is.
I was still getting to grips with whatever a brat summer was, and now apparently that's so last year. I had a quick look up in the break, and apparently 6-7 was first from some sort of rap song, and apparently it means kind of so-so and whatever or something like that. But I honestly don't know. And yeah, I feel very, very old and out of touch now.
Apparently, all the kids are saying it, and that's why we don't know.
That's why we don't.
Cindy and Liam, thank you so much for taking us through the papers. Coming up next in the sport, has Ipswich manager Kieran McKenna ruled out taking charge at Scottish champions Celtic?